All right, good afternoon. Call the meeting of the Urban Renewal Authority to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Dennehy. Commissioner Grantham. Councilmember Hamrick.
Here.
Commissioner Reeser. Here. Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Brandon Smith. Councilmember Stein. Councilmember Tracy.
Here. I'm here.
Mine's online as well.
Oh, okay.
I'm on. Thank you.
Councilmember
Oh.
Worthington.
Here.
Chairman Payne.
Here. I would ask you to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move on to citizens requesting to speak to the Urban Renewal Authority. Don't see anybody present. Move on to the consent agenda, items A and B. And Ryan, do you have anything on consent agenda?
No, sir. Item A is approval of minutes for January 4th, and item B is cash disbursements from January 5th to April 5th.
Okay, no additions or corrections. Okay. Entertain a motion then.
I move we accept the consent agenda as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Aye.
Commissioner Reeser.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Aye.
Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington.
Aye.
Chairman Payne.
Aye. Okay, we'll move on to the financial report.
All righty. February's beginning balance was $877,625.66. We had a deposit of a property tax increment of $34,768. Transfer to city for operating support, $35,633.28. And the first loan payment to the city for repayment of the initial investment for startup, $5,421.62. February ending was $871,338.76. In March, we had our second loan payment to the city, $5,421.62. Quarter one of administrative costs, $9,375.14. And the Holiday Inn Express sales tax TIF reimbursement, $4,578.31, for a March ending balance of $851,963.69.
Thank you for that report. Any questions and or comments? Okay, thank you. Move on to Executive Director report. Ryan, you have anything?
Yes, sir. So got a couple things. The first one is actually going back to what Commissioner Reeser was talking about with a deposit from the county for property tax assessments. We're waiting for some additional information from the county in order to do the share back payments back to the various taxing entities. So as soon as we have that information, we'll be cutting checks to go back to the various taxing entities. We do have a couple items in the pipeline for potential tax increment financing projects. We've been approached by a housing developer that's looking at some development over by Dawson Ranch, over there by Interroll. So we have provided a little bit of information for him. We're waiting for him to get back to us. And then we have, the folks that are doing the homes on St. Scholastica have asked whether or not TIF funding would be available to them, so we're working on something for that. And then the final one is this commercial development, the rebuild of the property over here at 3rd and Royal Gorge Boulevard. They may be looking for some tax increment financing to help with retaining wall and some of the upsizing of utilities that they need to do over there. So 3 that are in the pipeline. We haven't gotten very far with them, but having those discussions.
Okay, any questions or comments to the executive director? The only other thing, I had spoken to Ryan before the meeting. We need resolutions from the 2 water districts to include the fire district property. If you can get those to me, I'll get that taken care of. And I believe you need to talk to the school district?
Yeah, I'll follow up with Adam. I believe we had a
Okay.
discussion about it, but I don't know if the resolution ever went to the school board.
Okay, all right.
No.
This is the fire district, the new fire district station, the property there for the development up front of there that we're
The two
fire
little
district's trying
commercial,
to get rid of.
the 2 commercial spots?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Well, although I think we're going to try to do the whole property, if I recall.
Might
Yeah.
as well, yeah.
Yeah, I
I
believe
think I think it makes it easier
yeah.
to do that. Okay. If you can get that to me, I'll work on that. Okay. We move on to discussion with a building systems grant. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may remember, it may have been beginning of this year, the January meeting, or late last year, we had, when we were doing the budget, we talked about creating a building systems grant. I know Rick's been working on that a little bit, but we're starting to see more and more requests come in for the life safety grant right now. And would have an interest or want to see if the board has an interest in transferring that money from the building systems grant to the life safety grant. And I'll let Rick talk a little bit more about that, because even since we put this on the agenda, we've had another request.
Yeah, we have, typically, the life safety grant, as you recall, it pays up to 75% of the cost of life safety improvements, up to a max of $50,000 per building, which is a pretty sizable incentive. We have right now, we have one official application in for a building at 506 Main. They are talking about potentially doing 502 Main as well. We have potentially a request, there hasn't been a request made yet, a potential request for 517 and 519 Main Street. That's a project that has commercial downstairs, and they're renovating the upstairs into 10 smaller efficiency units. And they've discovered throughout the process that they need to do sprinkler systems. We have $75,000 budgeted total right now for the entire account. That would leave about $25,000 for 517, 519, which helps, but it's still a painful reality for them. That's what made me think maybe we should request an amendment to the budget. Yesterday I had a conversation about another building on Main Street, 621 and 623, that's for sale right now. A buyer is interested in it, and they are concerned that they're going to run across life safety concerns, fire suppression systems. Told him that, quite honestly, right now, the way it's budgeted, there would be nothing available this year unless there was a budget amendment again that would put more funding into it. I don't know if that's going to be an actual application in the coming days, but there is much more activity right now on the fire suppression side of things that's causing some constraints. And if we can make some changes, great. That's why you see in front of you, you've got 2023 proposed and then 2023 proposed alternate, which I added because of my conversation yesterday, basically transferring all of the funds from the building systems into life safety. I've begun working through a building systems. I don't have one put together, and there has been no discussion about it in the public yet. So throwing it out there as a discussion to take your feedback, see what we should do. it is a very looked upon favorably grant. The reality is that with 502, if 502 and 506 are done, that's technically 2 buildings. And looking at the application, looking at the program, I think we probably need to determine or define building, because it's kind of wonky downtown with, 621 and 623 technically are one parcel. They were not the same building. 623, 625 was built as one building, but somewhere along the line they got split up. So that throws a little confusion in the definition of a building, but that's a future meeting, I think, after conversations with attorneys about that one. But so anyway, that's where we are right now. We've got potentially 3 buildings interested right now in the life safety grant.
Well, when we had discussions on these grants, we said at the time, I think everybody pretty much agreed that we're going to have to be pretty fluid on this because we're still in the infant stages on a lot of this stuff. So the note here was 25,000 to transfer, but you're proposing the whole 75,000 to make life safety grant 150,000.
Throwing it out there for discussion.
Throwing it out there.
Based on a conversation yesterday that changed
Okay.
things.
So, any other comments?
So I have a question. What is remind us what a building systems grant would cover, please.
That would cover more of the, if you think about buildings like New Method, they had an old 50-year-old boiler system. That would have been almost impossible to replace, or almost impossible to fix. It was impossible to fix. In addition to ADA compliance and fire, there's also these old systems in the buildings that can be very challenging. Old boiler systems or something like that can be very expensive. Even in a smaller building, a friend of mine in town has a small house that was built in the 1800s. It had a $15,000 boiler go out on it. That was a house. Commercial buildings are a little different. So things that are going to provide much more energy efficient.
Yeah, so we were looking at HVAC systems, potentially hood systems for future restaurants, really things that are capital expenses that are going to stay with the building, nothing that would transfer with any ownership. They would live with the building.
Okay. Madam Mayor, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just saying, even if we transferred over the entire $150,000, that wouldn't probably be enough to even cover those proposed buildings.
It would increase the entire grant to 150, the grant budget item to 150, so that'd be $3 $50,000 grants.
3 $50,000 grants. But if I'm thinking for 10 efficiency apartments, I guess they would only get 50,000, is that right?
They would only get 50,000.
But there's a good chance that they're looking at a 80,000 plus project.
The pricing they have right now is 110,000, but that was, lack of a better term, spitball pricing. They didn't go out competitively. That was one contractor that came in and said it would cost about $110,000.
And I
That
think,
sounds high.
and through some discussions with the building department and the fire district, there may be some opportunities for not as robust of a system. I think they got quotes on something that you probably need for a commercial space, not necessarily for a residential space.
Residential space.
Yeah.
But residential does have to go up to commercial quality if you have more than 3 units. So when we did our building, it's not just, let's say for our 4 units, it was around 50,000-ish. But then it's not only that, but then you have to put in an additional fire monitoring system and special ADA flashing lights and detections and all of these other things that really added
Yeah.
a lot more to those costs. It's really burdensome when you already have an older building that is full of surprises and needs everything redone: plumbing, electricity, firewalls and soundproofing and insulation. All of the things just add up like crazy. And so if there is a demand for this, I think it's exciting that this is popular and that it is being used so much, because that means our buildings downtown are finally being renovated and are having those changes that we were hoping to see. I was just saying that even if we do the whole 150,000, it's not going to be, be enough, but that's okay. I mean, that's okay, but but I'm excited to see that things are happening with it.
Yeah, I've had the conversation with the owners of 517 and 19, and they would love to see most of it covered, but, you know, they understand that we just don't, the program doesn't cover more than 75%, and it doesn't cover more than 50 grand right now. So.
Well, and now, because there is such a demand, we need to be able to spread the love to lots of different people.
Mhm.
Yeah. So can you tell us again, what is 506 and 502 doing with their fire suppression?
506, this is John Paul Airy's building, adding on to Taylor West,
Okay.
doing the men's store in Taylor West. He is going to be sprinkling that building for sure because of potential, well, quite honestly, because of conversations we had in the past about a possible distillery. Future use will probably dictate needing something in there, so he's going to put sprinkler system in 506. The challenge they have right now is that the water line that would have to come in would take up a huge chunk of the corner of 506, so now they're talking about possibly putting the water line in 502 right next door, which would be basically Tailored West window.
The fire suppression water line?
Yeah, and then, so now they're thinking about just sprinkling both buildings. Again, we're talking about two buildings, but the intent initially was 506 Main Street, but caused a little bit of complication because of the fire line that has to go in. But planning for the future, which is good.
And by the way, those water lines, they're 4-inch lines. Those
They're
aren't
big.
small lines, yeah.
They're big, yeah. And technically, you're not supposed to be sharing lines between two buildings. And I think in this case, we're having a meeting on Tuesday, actually, to talk about that.
With the fire district?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that will decide that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a meeting on Tuesday with the fire district. I won't be there. Kathy will be there from the building
Well,
department.
And make sure you get a firm idea on where they want that fire hose line hooked up on the outside, because that, for some, who didn't get that clear direction from the beginning, have had to make changes later, and so it's
Mhm.
best to know right up front, because that is a cumbersome
That's the objective,
detail.
yeah. Yeah, that's the objective. And I'll talk to the project manager about that, too.
And what was the other address?
Uh,
Because there's three, wasn't there?
Yeah, 506 Main, 517, 519, that's one
Okay.
building on
517,
Main.
590.
And then potentially 621 and 623. But that one's more speculation right now. That's going through the due diligence process of purchasing. 517 and 19 is in construction, and 506 is in construction.
And Chairman Payne, it looks like Commissioner Tracy has her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good, thanks. I just had a more general question about, and maybe this is a question about how we've done this in the past. I assume that in the past, before we considered this expansion of funds, that it's kind of first come, first served during a calendar year. When the money runs out, it runs out. Is that correct?
Yes, pretty much, yeah. It can be, if we get multiple applications, we have the discretion to determine who gets it, who doesn't, so not necessarily first come,
Right.
first serve.
So but if the money gets used up by May or whatever, then people later in the year just can't really apply for anything. I just wanted to be sure I understood that.
That's correct, yeah.
I don't know, have we
And
had-
so even if we expand this fund, if we decide to say, yeah, let's just move the building systems money into life safety, it'd still be the same kind of a thing, that an application later in the year just might not have access to anything.
That's correct.
That's
as
a
it's-
possibility.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had that situation yet. Yeah.
No, I don't believe we have yet.
Okay,
Okay? thank
thanks.
you. Amy, do you have something?
Thank you, Chairman Payne. Just a follow-up to that, I'm wondering if we do have multiple folks considering if it would make sense to have kind of an open period where there is a firm deadline where folks can apply and then we can consider them all at the same time. I am concerned if we have one application that's in and you have 3 that are already considering and we know that we won't have enough money to cover all 4, and honestly, if some of them are actual multiple buildings, it could be 5 or 6. I think it might behoove us to make it really clear so that it's not a first come, first serve, but instead this is our open window.
Competitive.
This is our open window, and then we can review all of them at the same time, so that it isn't a kind of race, if that makes sense. Or I don't know if you see any downsides to that.
It does. The challenge I think I see with that is some of this is based on timing as well, construction timing. Technically speaking, the application calls for knowledge of this or the application prior to construction. But in reality, it doesn't necessarily work that way because construction begins and then the 11th hour surprise comes along and then they're stuck. So timing, construction timing along with that application window may or may not work. And we probably would have to tweak the we would have to tweak the application anyway to do that.
Yeah, I just think construction timing with the developers, I just don't know if that almost would become more burdensome. Where we have had, like, before the budget was a lot smaller, and we had 2 projects in the works in Canyon, and so the developer chose, okay, well, I'll do this project this year, and then I'll schedule the next project in January of the following year, so that way I can piggyback and that, when that new funding comes online. And so there's some flexibilities maybe that way for those who aren't online yet.
The good thing, though, is that we're catching more of them earlier, so we can start having the conversations now that people know it's out there. I don't think I had any contact from potential buyers before about the grants as a due diligence process. So I think that's a plus, and that came from Florence. So that was a plus. So I think in longer term, it's going to be easier to manage the timing of those things with contractors as long as we can catch them early and we can anticipate. The other side of the coin, though, is I think we need to have more of the conversations with the building official in the fire department long before construction, to make sure that we know exactly what to expect and not have surprises. And I can't speak for whether there were, I know in the case of 5/17/19, they were surprised. But I think probably most of the time, there's not necessarily a surprise, just the timing of things in the
How far were
application.
they in their project when they got surprised by having to put in fire suppression?
They were beginning they were demoed and beginning to ask for approvals on construction. They had to move some walls. And then somewhere, I don't know how this happened, quite honestly, because
I think they were still going through the permitting process, so they
That's
still
where
had
it
to go
would've
through
been
plan
triggered.
review. That's what
plan
came
review,
up.
and that's where it came up.
That is hard, though, when we have 2 different entities permitting and approving, that can be those disconnects. But
Yeah, and there are differences between the systems, but they're still expensive. I think, I don't remember the terminology, R1 versus R3 or something like that.
there is.
Yeah, I'm sure you know more of that than I do.
And this all stemmed from the building codes being updated for fire suppression to be
Building and
added
fire.
into the building codes, so the city and the county were on the same page. Is that right?
Well, we actually came up with the life safety grant before any of the building codes were updated.
Yeah.
We actually, as the city, we did it before the urban renewal was formed.
Right.
Because we were seeing as a barrier for development downtown especially. We had somebody who was very interested in developing Skyline Theater and what they wanted to do with it, turning it into a live performance venue. We ran into issues with the fire department and the need for a sprinkler system in that building. And that's really where the genesis of this program started.
And as we get funds coming in through the years, this may be something we put more attention to, is this type of thing to help folks out. I don't know, hard to say what 3 to 5 years from now is going to bring, but it looks like it might be trending that way. But as far as the question in front of us now is, do we want to Oh, does anybody have anything else before I?
Actually, I do have just a little thing, and that is to have a comparison to what other municipalities require to have that trigger for fire suppression system. I haven't dug very deeply, but I mean, the rumors on the road are that Canyon City, it's triggered. If you have 3 units, you have to put in a fire suppression system. The rumor is in Colorado Springs, that is not the case. It is a much more lenient threshold to have to put in a fire suppression system.
We can certainly do that research.
I mean, and that's another way to make building affordable housing a lot more affordable, is if we aren't overly burdensome on that. I mean, I know we have to have fire, life, and safety, but I'm pretty sure some other municipalities do that without having to require for just 3 units.
Yeah, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but the 3 units was not proposed by the city. That was very strongly recommended from the fire district.
Is that something that we ended up as a council passing, though?
As part of the
It is,
building
as part of
code.
the building code,
Yeah.
yes.
I'd be happy to do that research.
And
I might be proved wrong, but I definitely want to know.
I would just point out that actually this discussion has been going on in front of council for quite some time. Council sent a delegation up to Buena Vista, and we looked at their downtown. It was when we were looking at how you develop downtown when you have, restrictions like this. That was back when Amanda Cochran and Her Honor Caitlin Turner were on council. So the discussion has evolved over the years, and as we learn new things, we've tried to address it. And this is really just a continuation of that effort, I would say.
Yeah, next week, we have the DCI conference. Ryan and I are both going to the DCI conference, and we're going to start the conference by going to a distillery there in Longmont, because they are in a historic building. When we were trying to get a distillery here, we contacted them. I had a conversation with them about it, but we'd like to get there and see it and figure out how it all worked in order to determine how we could.
What steps they went through. And
Yeah, because those are probably the most challenging, since you're dealing with combustibles potentially, and, so that'll be an interesting conversation next week.
Okay. Amy?
Thank you, Chairman Payne. It certainly sounds like there's plenty of demand to make the move of funding. I would be interested to know, though, have you heard, I know that the grant isn't out there yet, but have you heard of the need for building systems assistance from different property owners? Are we kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul here? Could you talk a little bit more about what we lose if we move these funds?
When we had a meeting here last year to talk about the life safety grant, the facade grant, and determine, what would make them more attractive. There was discussion about mechanical systems in buildings, energy efficiency in buildings. We don't necessarily hit those with these. We hit ADA compliance and fire safety, but there are other challenges beyond those. So yeah, there was some discussion about that, some interest in a grant like that.
But you haven't had specific requests or specific building owners coming to you with, we need X funding to cover XYZ types of improvements?
No, I don't think there were any specific requests. I think what we were, just in conversations that Rick and I have had over the years, we see a need for it, not necessarily any specific request.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the life safety grant. Nobody knew, before there was a program, there was no demand.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I can
Sure.
see though maybe some value of maybe adding on ADA requests for funds for ADA compliance in the life and safety grants, because that also can be really burdensome.
We added it to the life safety grant, and we also added it to the
Okay,
facade grant.
so it is.
Yeah,
Both of those
to
are.
some
So we
extent,
have-
yeah.
okay.
There's still bathrooms, bathrooms that aren't necessarily, because a lot, for some reason, a lot of bathrooms were built like 2 or 3 steps up in the back of a building, and that doesn't work very well.
It's because of the flow of the sewer getting into the
Yeah.
pipes. Mhm.
Yeah.
They
So-
put in a pump.
But we haven't had anything, I mean, we have building owners who are running into issues like that with ADA compliance. But we didn't really have a grant that covers anything like that. And ours still, you could argue, don't. I mean, if somebody's gonna apply for a life safety grant, they're gonna apply for a life safety grant. We call it now the Life Safety and Accessibility Grant
So they
program.
can.
They can, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just not known for that yet. Building systems would probably cover that a little better.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Questions or comments? So the question before us, do we want to transfer the whole amount out of the building systems grant to life safety grant? I'll entertain a motion one way or the other.
I move that we approve a budget amendment transferring funds from the building systems grant to the life safety grant.
May I just ask that the motion include, if we're doing part of the funds or all of the
All of
funds?
Okay,
Please.
let me redo that.
What's the amount, 75,000?
Yep, approve a budget amendment transferring $75,000 from the building systems grant to the life safety grant.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to transfer out of the building systems grant to the life safety grant, 75,000. That would make the life safety grant 150,000. Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Yes.
That is the motion. Any other further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Microphone.
Mike?
Aye.
Sorry. Mayor Smith,
Aye.
Councilwoman Stein,
Aye.
Councilwoman Tracy,
Aye.
Councilwoman Worthington,
Aye.
Chairman Payne.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the end of our business. Ryan or Rick, do you have anything else? Not on the agenda.
I do not.
I do
Okay.
not.
All right, with no further business coming before this board, we are adjourned.